Hello, everyone. Welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival Episode 129. I'm Enigmius, and today we're building a new spaceship. That's right, it's a brand new spaceship. If you watched the last episode, towards the end, we were talking about some of the things that I would be doing in the immediate future. One of the things that I talked about was doing a orbital shipyard, a space station, that would make it a little bit easier to build these large ships, not because of the gravity thing, but because if you're building really large ships on planets, you have to have a flat platform to build them on. Otherwise the terrain can cause irritating little problems when it comes to having the chassis sitting somewhere where it's touching the terrain, because then it likes to get flipped around a little bit. Unfortunately, I can't build a space station. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but first I'll explain to you what's going on here. I've placed the core on a platform up in the air, as is my habit now, so that the core will be elevated in the chassis of the ship, and I don't have to worry about raising the ship as we build it so that I can build underneath. It's just already in place. So then I build a frame down from that, and I put some legs on the frame so that it can sit all on its own, and then I remove the platform that we initially placed the starter assembly on, and we're good to go. We can continue building the ship from there. This build is going to be a little bit different from the ones that I've done recently, in that instead of building the outer hull and then putting everything inside, we're actually going to build the inside first and then build the hull around it. It's not going to make a huge difference in terms of the difficulty of making everything fit, but it is going to provide me with an opportunity, once the inner core is done, to just think about building the exterior of the ship based on what's already there, without having to have that secondary consideration for whether or not we're leaving enough space inside, or is it going to be too far to get to this part of the ship that we don't want to put things there because it'll be a nuisance to get there, that sort of thing. So the beginning of this whole thing is we're going to get it set up so that we've got a platform running from the back of the ship to the front, and then we're going to encase it in glass so that we can pressurize parts of it if we want, and have other parts unpressurized. For example, if you want to exit the ship, you don't necessarily want to pressurize the area that you're exiting through, because it's a pain in the butt. But you can have these little compartments where there is no oxygen and still pass through them without your helmet on, because it's just a very small little bubble that you're passing through into another pressurized area. So we're going to have this great big long glass tube, and from that tube we'll branch off all of the different sections of the ship that we might want to have, like storage, construction, all of our survival things like med bays and oxygen machines and all these other things that we need, and then we can build the hull around it. The benefit to this, I think, in part to the viewing experience, will be you'll be able to see parts of the ship kind of taking shape with a sense of completion fairly early on, because we'll build each section, and then you'll see what it's going to look like with all of the machines in it, and then how it's going to look like relative to everything else that's going on. And then when we start working on the outer hull, it should feel a little bit more like a substantial ship that we're building, instead of a hull around nothingness. We'll see how it goes. But you can see here we've got the frame in place that's holding everything down on the ground, and now we're building this 3-block wide platform out of combat steel. We're actually going to replace this with a single platform block. It'll be a single platform block running a straight line from one end of the ship to the other, passing through these different places as you go, without having to go around anything or above or below or anything like that. It's just going to be right there, and then you branch off and go to the individual sections of the ship that you need to when you need to go there. Now, why can't I build a space station? Well, I tried. I loaded up the Saturnus, I had the Mine Orb, I had the Manta, and I had the Broadsword all attached to the Saturnus somehow, and we lifted off to get out of the atmosphere of Oskatune. And originally I was going to head to Zaheen, because that's where I've got 7 auto miners above the 7 iron deposits that have been there for some time, just waiting for me to come and gather up all the iron and refuel them so they can have another go. As soon as I got out of the atmosphere, the game dropped to 1 frame per second or less, and I wasn't really able to do anything at all. I tried a number of different things. I tried things in the game, like turning off all the lights in all the ships in case it was like a shadow issue causing some sort of processing bottleneck somewhere. There were a number of different things that I thought of that maybe were contributing to the problem, but changing them around didn't do anything at all. I tried some video settings, turning off shadows altogether, and a couple of other things that were supposedly potentially contributing to a lot of overhead in terms of making the game render at a reasonable pace. I'm running a fairly decent computer that shouldn't have too many difficulties keeping the game going, so I had a feeling that it was probably a bug of some sort or some sort of other technical issue. I posted on the official forums about it in the bug report thread, and someone suggested that it could be because I'm using an old save game, and if I were to maybe start the game fresh, start a new game, and then spawn my ships in and try and carry on from there, that maybe that would solve the problem. So I tried, and I went in knowing first of all that I wasn't interested in starting from scratch. I understand some people find it distasteful to use console commands or anything else to spawn in items, but for me, if I'm making a transition from one world to another, which is basically what we're doing when we're starting fresh, I don't really mind giving myself a bit of a boost in terms of resources just to save time getting reestablished. It's really all it is. It's not changing the way I play the game. It's just acknowledging that we're making a transition that I would have preferred to have not made, and we could have just, you know, spawn in some things to get us started and then carry on from there as per usual. That would be the idea. There's a way to do that in survival, that you can spawn in items without having to switch to creative to get them. But that doesn't really help me with spawning in something like the Saturnus, for example, because I found out the hard way that it's too big to build from a blueprint in survival and with the default settings in single player. And as far as I know, I can't change those settings to allow for a larger ship. Apparently the maximum ship size class is 10. It will allow you to spawn in with a factory, and the Saturnus is 13. So that was a no-go. Going into a brand new survival world and spawning in my ships using the factory and the blueprint and materials that I gave to myself using the item menu command was not an option. The other option was, apparently someone suggested, do everything in creative, spawn in your ships, it doesn't worry about the size when it's in creative mode, and then switch it over to a survival world and carry on from there. There apparently was a method for doing that is, from what I was reading, no longer viable. So that was off the table as well. So we can't start off in survival and give ourselves a leg up without building a brand new ship to get around in, which I won't rule it out as a potential solution in the future after this build is done, but for now it was not something that I was prepared to entertain as an option. So I left that on the table, and we can't do the creative to survival thing because apparently it corrupts save games when we try and use that method. That was kind of a hack anyways, a way of getting around the limitations of not being able to switch between survival and creative. Anyways, you get the idea that it's been kind of a nightmare trying to get this set up. If you're wondering why specifically I'm not building a space station and I'm instead building a new capital vessel, I hope you understand now it's not because I just didn't feel like it. There's extenuating circumstances that prevented me from doing what I had originally planned to do. So we're going to build this ship, we're going to get it done, and then we're going to take the steps that are necessary to get established in a universe where I can once again journey into space and go visit other planets. It's possible, depending on how things go, that I may need to bring in some resources to support this build that weren't acquired in the common methods that are available to an honest player in the game. I want to tell you that I feel bad about that. If it was a general practice for me to spawn in resources and then try and tell you guys that I mine everything and I do all that kind of stuff legit, that would be, to me, not very nice. But in this kind of situation where I can't leave the planet to go and get resources and all I have to work with is what this planet is providing, I may not be able to actually do what I want to do without either getting stuff illegitimately or cannibalizing the Saturnus, which is an option, but a very, very time-consuming option. We've learned from dismantling our other capital vessels to support the build of the next capital vessel that it takes a very, very long time to break down a large ship built entirely out of combat steel. So we're still going to have fun. We're still going to do a build that I'm very enthusiastic about. I've got a lot of ideas in my head for the way I want it to take shape. And in the grand scheme of things, it should be a fairly transparent build in the sense that we're just going to build this stuff and you're not really going to notice, if I don't mention it, that things are a little bit wonky in terms of how we're getting stuff and what the limitations are in terms of where we can go and what we can do. I hope that makes sense. What's going on? So now you can see we've got this platform running the full length of the ship, one end to the other, 3 blocks wide, combat steel, kind of spendy for this platform. And I realized that based on what I have in mind for the outer hull of the ship, I don't really need to worry too much about defending this inner core that we're building, hence why it's built out of armored glass and platforms, as opposed to, for example, combat steel walls for the platform. It's just a fairly fragile central core that's going to be surrounded by some pretty beefy hull plates and protected that way. So I don't necessarily mind having this 1 block wide platform. And you can see here, I'm actually placing the beams to either side of that individual center block, hoping that we will be able to put some rails on it, at least to make it a little bit easier to navigate. But of course, that wouldn't fit with the glass tube thing. The glass tube wouldn't fit around it the way that I had in mind. So we'll remove those, we'll place the platforms in place of the combat steel, and people will just have to sober up before they try making the run from one end of the ship to the other. If they do fall off, they won't fall far. It's not a large tube. It'll be very, very easy to jump back onto the platform with just their basic jetpack. The added benefit to setting things up in a straight line like this is when you're in space and you're using the flight mode with gravity off, it should be a pretty quick and easy trip from one end of the ship to the other without having to run on the ground kind of thing. We'll see how it goes, but that's potentially an option. So we're going to continue. We're going to carry on. We're going to finish off this glass tube, and then we'll get down to the business of having the individual compartments along the way that have all of the critical systems in them that we can access and you know, make them as accessible as possible so you don't have to go far. We'll think about how we're going to set up the pressurization for each compartment, what compartments need to be pressurized, etc., and then we'll get around to designing the hull. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.